Okay, the last video we looked at how to create a material and the different kinds of materials you can create, and how to edit that material in Photoshop. This next one I'm going to show you the way I prefer to do it, and that's in Mudbox. So if you have your object selected, go to File, Send to Mudbox, Send as New Scene. Okay, so there was an error loading my PSD file. That's okay, I don't really care. I'm going to create a new one. Diffuse, that's your color layer. So if I want to paint on this the texture of a hammer, I could go and open an image of a hammer and use that as a stencil. Use a wood texture. All I did was just Google it, go under Images, and for size, I want something large. You want to save this into your source images folder. I'm just going to call it wood. Wood stencil 1. Then in Mudbox, there are sculpting tools. People can and do sculpt in Mudbox. I'm not going to get into that for this. And then there are paint tools. Under Projection, you can add a stencil over here under Stencil. If you click on this little arrow right here, you can add a stencil. Under Maya Demo Source Images, Wood Stencil 1. Let's try this one out. Okay. Holding down, it gives you a little hint. Holding down S and the middle mouse button moves the stencil. Holding down S, left mouse button rotates the stencil. Holding down S and right mouse button makes it larger and smaller. So let's zoom in a little closer and let's start painting some hammer texture on this hammer. The hotkeys in Mudbox are the same as the hotkeys in Maya. Alt left mouse button orbits, Alt right mouse button zooms in and out, and Alt middle mouse button trucks around. Let me go ahead and try to avoid the edge. If your texture has a seamless edge, you can turn on tiling. Use tiles, there we go. And this one sort of does, but sort of doesn't. I think I'll just turn it off and just keep an eye on where the edge is. That way I don't accidentally put a hard edge in there and don't notice it. Hello. Okay, so that's not bad. That looks pretty wood-like. Let's get the top. Turn Q on to put it back on. I'm not going to worry about the fact that this doesn't look like the top of wood. You know, actually, maybe if I stretch it out. That's good enough. Okay, now I'm going to go in and I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to call this one metal. And I'm going to turn the stencil off, and I'm going to go under paintbrush instead of under projection. And now I'm just painting. If you double click on the paintbrush, it'll bring up the parameters over here. I don't want it to be that color. I'm going to go with if you double click on this. Oh, it did. It's just way off screen. If you double click on this somewhere, it'll bring up your palette or your paintbrush editor. Make this sort of a dark gray. That looks like a hammer to me. And I'm on a separate layer, and what's great about that is I don't have to worry about where these edges are. I can go and erase them later on. So I'm going to go ahead and paint the metal part, and then I'm going to fix parts I don't like. If you hold down B and move left and right, your brush gets larger and smaller. I'm holding down the same key, Alt, same keys I did in Maya, Alt and middle mouse button to trek around. I'm going to paint Erase, and I'm going to erase the metal on the top. I'm going to change my brush a bit. I'm going to give it a hard edge like this. That way it goes right over to the edge and just cuts off right on the border. Holding down B to make it smaller. And I'm just erasing the metal color on the top. So before I finish, I want to go ahead and add some rust to the hammer. You can spend some time and you can make this look really good. I'm not going to bother. I'm going to add a new layer just by right-clicking, New Layer. And call this one Rust. And I want to use a stamp and play around with some of these different ones. These are really fun and there's a lot you can do with them. Let me try this one to see how that looks. That's odd. Click on Paintbrush, then I go up here and randomize this a bit more. Check the default. That's not bad, but that's not great. Let me randomize it a little bit more. This is randomize the rotation. This is randomize the where it is on the left and right, and this is where it is up and down. This is randomize the size, and this is randomize the value. So we could make this a very rusty hammer. You can see how this would be good for all kinds of stuff. It's very much like Photoshop, but it works better in 3D than Photoshop does. Photoshop is a 2D program that just sort of had some 3D capabilities tacked on, and it shows. Randomize this one a little bit more. Alright, that'll do. Now what I want to do is there is a A dry brush tool, you can use this to paint over something. Let me take the stencil or the stamp off. I'm going to just go over the rust. What dry brush does is it sort of ignores the spots that are deep in. Now that's odd that it. Oh. So like the parts that are in deep crevices aren't going to have as much effect by the dry brush. I think I went too far. Go and erase some. I am still using my stencil. I did not mean to use that in my stamp. Control Z undoes, just like in most programs. Right click and merge the visible ones. And then I can right click and duplicate it again. Then go over here, move it down into the bump map. Get rid of this one by right clicking and delete selected. Okay, and now it has added some bumps in there that correspond to the color maps. So I'm going to turn this down a bit because it's a little too deep. I think something sort of like that. Now we've got some very slight texture on the hammer and some color. Reflection, I'm just going to turn reflection all the way off. All right, and then you can send it, you can file and send to Maya and update the current scene. Or you have to select it. And continue. Ta-da! That's odd. If it gives you trouble, and sometimes it does, you can just export the layers. You can pull up Mudbox and File, export all paint layers, and merge all the channels. This will give you a different file for your diffuse, your bump, and your reflection mask. And you want to make sure you know where you're saving it. Source images, choose that folder. And I'm going to call this one Hammer Diffuse. And I'm going to change it from a PSD to a dot PNG, because I trust PNGs.